Evening. Welcome to the November 13th Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, we're off to a little bit of a late start this evening for the televised portion of our meeting. We began with a work session that ran later than we expected, so we appreciate everyone's patience, and we will get underway with any brief announcements that folks have. Who has any announcements for this week? Trustee Guerra.
Yes, good evening. So Trustee Casad actually asked me this earlier and it prompted me to pull up the schedule. So the Ossining Emergency Homeless Shelter, thank goodness, thank God, is back this year in Ossining. As you know, there are many who need a place to go. And we had our first day or two of cold weather. And as you know, we are heading into winter. So the first week of the program is the week of November 24th. And it's being held at St. Paul's that week, and then I believe it's going to alternate to about 15 different congregations between churches and synagogues and other centers, which is pretty nice. All you have to do is at 9 p.m. Be in front of Open Door Family Medical Center, where a staff person, and depending on where the host congregation is or church is, they will either walk you if it's walking distance, or they have a van. So that's open to anyone. All you have to do is show up in front of Open Door at 9 p.m. And if anyone has any ideas or has a time, and wants to, walk with me and a lot of the clergy and members of our shelter to really make sure everyone knows that this free program is available and that we don't really, we don't really ask questions or evangelize or any of the common perceived fears. This is just a safe place that you can come in the winter to be housed, get a meal, and start your morning. So that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else with announcements? Okay, I will just give folks an update on a few things. Jamie Hoffman and I both attended the community organizations meeting today at the library, which is, I guess, organized by Ossining Children's Center and David Carlucci's office, and there were a number of organizations there. It's a group that used to meet years ago, and now we've rekindled that regular meeting. This is the second one that took place, and there are a few events that are we should let folks know about that are coming up. Tuesday, November 19th, from 10 until 2 p.m. at the Joseph G. Caputo Community Center is the Senior Fair. So if you are a senior citizen or you have any senior citizens in your life, please share this information with them to come on down and learn about resources. There are dozens of local vendors that will be there, and it's organized by Senator Dave Carlucci and Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff, but there will be lots of community organizations represented there with services and opportunities to help support our senior community. Again, that is Tuesday, November 19th, so that's 1 week from yesterday. Neighbors Link was also there, and they've got a couple of programs. One of them is coming right up, and it is free citizenship classes. There are a number of people in Ossining who are interested in applying for citizenship, and so preparing for that opportunity requires a significant amount of time, and there is limited space. But if you are interested, please contact the Ossining Neighbors Link. The Ossining Neighbors Link is located on Spring Street. They opened less than 2 years ago in that location. The space is limited, as I said. The number for Neighbors Link is 914-666-3410, and the class begins on November 18th. It takes place in the evenings from 6 to 8:30 p.m. and will go through November, December, and January. Also, this is a drop-in class for learning English. So if you or anyone in your life is looking to work on your English language skills, you can drop in Mondays and Fridays in the morning from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. There is free childcare available if you're able to come on those Friday mornings from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And then for those folks who work regular working hours and want to take an evening class, there's drop-in classes Wednesday evenings from 7 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. There's no childcare for the evening class. So on Wednesdays from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And again, that is happening at the Ossining Neighbors link, and you can reach out to the Ossining Neighbors link. That's Rodolfo Moran, who is the manager for the Ossining site. The one other thing, and we shared this reminder to everybody in that group, but I wanted the board to know, I guess it's our official inaugural Ossining Counts Census Committee is happening the 21st. What day of the week is the 21st? Is that it's Thursday? Okay. You're right. It is. It's Thursday. So it's next Thursday,
Yeah.
November 20th, happening at noon right here.
November 21st.
November. Thank you, everybody. It's November 21st, right here at Village Hall, and we've reached out to and now offered a verbal reminder to everybody who was at today's meeting. We'll be doing a follow-up email to a number of stakeholders in the community and public and private organizations, and trying to get everybody to be as effective as possible in getting the word out about the importance of participating in the census and addressing a lot of the fears that are going to be a challenge for getting a complete count in our community. So if you are part of one of those organizations, or if you've not been contacted and we should be including you, then please email Jay Hoffman at villageofossining.org. Jamie is organizing these meetings for us, and we would love to have you participate with us next Thursday, November 21st will be our inaugural meeting, but there's also information on the Village website already. That's a lot of resources and links for you. If you look on the home page, you can see it says Ossining Counts Census 2020 right there. There's a little box. So you click there and get some information. All right, Madam Manager.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to introduce Lucia Hermano, Deputy Director of Lower Hudson Valley New York Civil Liberties Union. Welcome. So you can come up to the microphone.
Hi, I'm a little short, so I'm going to pull this down. Yeah, my name is Lucia Hermo. I'm the Deputy Director of the New York Civil Liberties Union's Hudson Valley chapter. We're based out of White Plains, but we serve 7 counties in the Hudson Valley. I first want to say thank you so much for inviting me to speak here tonight. I'm very excited to be here to talk about how Ossining can further support its immigrant community, and also just talk about how the New York Civil Liberties Union is here as a support and information for the village of Ossining and for all the people who live there. So thank you so much for having me here. I'm very honored to be here. So a little bit, the Hudson Valley chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union is an affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union, which is a national organization. We work in 3 main areas. We work in the courts, in the legislature, and in the communities to defend the Constitution and to uphold civil liberties for all who live in the country. We do that through various ways. We partner with grassroots organizations and activists. We partner with local government, and we just utilize all of the tools that we can in order to make sure that we're advancing civil liberties. And yeah, that's about it. As we have seen in the past, the federal government, namely Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has been terrorizing immigrant communities, not only here in New York State, but across the entire nation. This attack has led to an increase in fear, isolation, and distrust of government officials. In order for police to do their jobs and to ensure that their communities are safe, they must rely on trust and information from that community. This is why it's so important to have strong disentanglement policies, and disentanglement policies are ones that have written rules where local governments are distancing themselves from ICE and their tactics. This is essential for a strong community relationship with their local government. Police know from experience that trust between immigrant communities and police is undermined when the police are believed to be working with federal immigration officials. Immigrant witnesses and victims are less likely to report crimes and helpful intelligence, whether or not they themselves have legal status, for fear that they or their family members will be questioned or even detained. In Westchester County, we have the Immigrant Protection Act, which provides that county law enforcement agencies cannot communicate with immigration authorities about an individual except under very limited circumstances, cannot engage in immigration enforcement, and cannot use county resources for the detention of people by federal immigration authorities. Recently, there's been another court decision, Francis versus DeMarco, that made it clear that it is unlawful for New York state and local officers to seize, arrest, or detain a person who would otherwise be free to leave solely on the basis of an ICE detainer or an ICE administrative warrant. It is unlawful for New York state and local officers, including police, sheriffs, and corrections officers, to detain people for civil immigration violations because New York law does not authorize them to enforce civil immigration law. This includes prolonging traffic stops in order to wait for information or directives from ICE. I want to take time to thank the Village of Ossining for going a long way for their providing your resolution that supports immigrants in your community. I read through it and I really want to kind of applaud the sentiment behind it of making sure that all people in Ossining feel that Ossining is theirs and that they're community members. I would like to offer a couple recommendations on how that resolution can be strengthened so that the decisions that I just outlined in Francis and with the Immigrant Protection Act can be codified in this resolution so that when people read it, they know exactly what police are not going to be doing with regards to ICE. So one recommendation that I would have would be to delineate detainer requests, even though the Francis decision makes it known that it is unlawful for New York State to honor detainer requests. I think that should be enumerated in the policy. And I have some sample policies here that our office has put out. And I'm happy to share that information and to talk a little bit more. The New York Civil Liberties Union is here to kind of work with local governments and see how we can strengthen their policies. I think there could also be a clarification to show that local police will only respond to judicial orders and to delineate the difference between a judicial order and an ICE administrative warrant, which is something that can be a little bit confusing. So ICE officers can have what are called administrative warrants. Those warrants were found by the Francis decision to not be to be similar to ICE detainer requests, in where there's no obligation for local governments to comply with administrative warrants. If it's a court order, in limited circumstances, we know that courts have ordered for ICE to come to someone's house. It happens very infrequently, and it's one that's signed by a judge. So there's the difference. You have to look at who is signing it, if it's an ICE officer versus a judge. And I think it would be great if there could be some language in the resolution that would help to clear that up for people, because I think that there is a lot of confusion over what's an administrative warrant and what's order by a judge. And we're happy to help with the crafting of that language. And as I said, although local police may already be practicing the decision in Francis, which is not honoring ICE detainers, I think it's important to have that in writing so that people know exactly that this is something that should not be happening and that they can contact their police departments if that's something that they see is happening. Recently, we've heard reports that local police, when they're told that ICE is in the area, will dispatch to where ICE is, so that specifically for the purpose so that police can serve as a watchdog for the community and ensure that ICE is not engaging in problematic practices. Our office hasn't had a comment on whether this is a good or bad practice, but I do want to think through some questions that we can have to see if, I think the main thing is there's a risk when officers are in the same area where ICE is at people's homes, that local police officers will be seen as complicit or even approving of ICE being there. So my questions would be, does it look like local police are complicit in or encouraging ICE's behavior? There's still a lot of people who are unsure about the difference between local police and ICE. ICE usually has police on their back or in their uniform as part of their uniform. So it's very difficult sometimes for people to distinguish between local police and ICE. And so there's a risk when police are in the same area as ICE that it's showing that they're approving of those tactics, even though they might not be. They're there to look out for the community. There's not very many ways to clearly show that. How are local police distinguishing themselves from ICE and ensuring that the public that they are there to monitor ICE and not community members? If there is an instance where ICE is stepping outside of their bounds and violating the law, what authority does local police have to stop the interaction? There can be an option to record the interaction, but if they record the interaction, how will that recording be used? How will it get into the hands of the people who are fighting ICE for doing something bad? How is that recording going to be shared to the public, and how will it be used to help out the person who's been targeted by ICE? What protections can local law enforcement offer anybody who's being harassed by ICE in real time? And these are all questions that I don't have the answers to, but I encourage thoughts. So another aspect to think about is translation and information. So are community members able to communicate with the officer? For example, if the person speaks Spanish, will translation be available at the moment? And if a person does not speak Spanish or English, how will that officer be able to communicate information to that person about their rights and their rights when ICE is at their door? Will police officers be able to help family members or others in the household if somebody is picked up by ICE? What information or support would be needed that the police officer would have that they can hand off to family members? So if someone unfortunately is picked up by ICE, are police able to offer step-by-step afterwards information on how that person can find their loved one? And the ultimate question that I would ask is, does the benefit of having local police accompany ICE outweigh the potential downside of having immigrant communities believe that the Ossining police is working with them? So I think that the resolution is strong. There are some ways that there can be a little bit of clearer language in it, just to make sure that people completely understand that the police are not working with ICE. And I would encourage to think about this issue of police accompanying ICE, and to make sure that it's not that people are not viewing it as the opposite of what it's intended to do. I also want to just give a couple points on knowing your rights when interacting with ICE. So I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's really important to differentiate between a judicial and administrative warrant. So if ICE shows up and has a warrant, should really look at the signature, should really look if it's a judge, if it says ordered by the court, if it has something on the court there and is signed by the judge, you know that it's a judicial warrant, and that is one that is very much to be respected and to be allowed. The ICE administrative warrant is one that is not signed by a judge, so it doesn't have the same legal standing as the judicial one. If you are driving and pulled over, an officer can require you to show your license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance, but you don't have to answer any questions about your immigration status. As Ossining has said, police will not be asking questions about people's immigration status, and police cannot prolong the stop in order to determine someone's immigration status. You have the right to remain silent, and you do not have to discuss your immigration or citizenship status with anybody. And that is a right that everyone has in this country, the right to remain silent. It's an important one. Immigration law is a little bit different with regards to attorneys. You definitely still have the right to an attorney, but if you're under immigration law, one will not be provided for you if you cannot afford one. So you have the right to accurate representation. No one can deny your attorney access, but the recommendation is to reach out and to try to find some attorneys that specialize in immigration law. Do not lie or produce any false documents. That's something that's very important. And also don't sign anything without speaking to a lawyer first. One of the things that we see the most also, if there's any communication that is not in your language or that you don't understand, do not sign anything that you do not understand for whatever reason. You should be provided accurate translation and interpretation. And if someone asks you a question that you don't understand, do not answer it. You always have the right to remain silent. I just want to thank you so much for letting me talk a little bit about this, and I just really hope that we have a great relationship with Austining. And if you have any questions, I'm here. I got my card. I've got a couple one-pagers for on the recent Francis decision, and I've got some model ordinances that I'm happy to pass out. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Are there any questions from board members for Ms. Hermo while she's here?
I don't have any questions, but I wanted to thank you for your presentation and definitely for your recommendations. You have enlightened us on, or at least myself, on a couple of decisions that have been made recently that I was unaware of. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as I said, we're very happy to sit down and to look through some resolutions or to answer any more questions. So I'll also leave the handouts and my cards right over there. So thank you.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Trustee Farrow, did you have questions? You seem to be leaning forward.
Sure. I also want to thank you for your time as well. So I know we started a little late to get here. Oh, I also want to thank you for your time, and I'm on.
You just got it.
I'm on. Am I good? Okay. I also want to thank you for your time and also for waiting, and everyone else, because I know we started a little late. So I was the one that reached out to your office and to your staff solely because I figured that you know, we're so rich when it comes to a lot of resources when it comes to interactions with ICE and our immigrant community, but we haven't really had legitimate organizations that really have hands-on experience that are really dealing and leading the forefront with how to deal with this going forward. So I figured you guys would be a great resource, as you've already been. So thank you. I am curious to learn more about our current practice. Let me backtrack. So the reason why I invited your office here was because myself and Quantel Bazemore proposed a policy change that would stop us being one of the only communities in the county and state to what I call escort, but the police department called observe ICE when they're in our community. We had a very spirited discussion and a couple of disagreements, and the proposal was rejected. Upon the rejection of the proposal, the police department and the chief was supposed to provide an action plan that till this day has not been provided to yet as to how we're going to better educate or reach out or communicate. That was what that turned into, which the majority of my board chose to do, and that is totally okay. My concern and reasoning for proposing it with my colleague and some advocates was kind of what you said, that we know that its intention is not of malice, but that perception is everything. And when it comes to this particular issue, which is why, when I called, I voted down, but I called White Plains, Port Chester, Peekskill, Kirtland, spoke to their mayors, and they were like, yeah, we don't do this. They're chiefs. So the three that I spoke to, we don't do this, and, going forward, my concern was, besides the perception issue, which is the number one concern, is since we're going to continue being a leader in this practice for the purposes or the alleged purposes of protection, since I know and the chief has confirmed that we don't actually interfere when ICE knocks on their door, that when we're at these meetings and when the chief's at the school or are we telling them that they're protected when we know they're not, that we're not going to interfere? That know that you cannot call on Austining Police Department officers to interfere or to interpret or to verify rights or to, and that's the reality. So are we giving information that is not correct or is misleading, right? And that's what led to this whole conversation tonight. My new question, which you brought up, is since we are continuing this practice, how do we know if one of our officers does catch some footage on their cameras, right? Who finds it? At what point is that video available for a review? And because a lot of them can turn into legal cases, can turn into procurement for the possibility of deportation status or asylum applications or all that goes with immigration, at what point can one of our residents request that footage? Are they even allowed? How would they even go to do that? So I do love that. Actually, I didn't even think of that. I mean, I always had some concerns about how we better use eventually the footage of body worn cameras in our officers. I personally think that the two recommendations that you made earlier about the delineate detainer request, delineate the differences between judicial orders and administrative orders, and specifically writing what we should honor, not honor. I think those are no-brainers, and I would be in total favor of asking for those revisions on our resolution. I'm not going to put you or the Lower Hudson Valley, the NCOU, on the spot, but I do want to know, who I should contact, or at what point is it appropriate to report or to further escalate my question as to, are we giving inaccurate information or expectations to our residents when they are there observing or escorting ICE? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry.
Is there a question, or you just wanted to say you wanted to be more? I just didn't know you were asking.
I asked how we could learn about the video. I asked about how we could learn about the video footage. I answered that I would be okay with the top two revisions about the detainer request and judicial orders. I asked how I could elevate my concern about public deception, even though it's about perception when it comes to our practice about observing and escorting ICE. And did I miss anything else today? I think that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say I think it's first of all that we're happy to work through strengthening any resolutions, and we have the model policies. There's a couple other recommendations that we can do too. More on, there's some stronger language on kind of protecting private information. But I think it's also, what you said, it's just important to know the perception, because as someone who works with community organizations, with grassroots organizations, I think a lot of times we have some policy decisions or decisions that are coming down that we're trying to bring out to the community. And as much as the Village of Ossining, as much as we, like local groups, grassroots groups, will do their best to get out the information, specifically here that police is not approving of ICE, they're here specifically to monitor you. There's always going to be people who fall through the cracks. There's going to be people who have not made contacts with service organizations, or there's going to be people who didn't have the information translated in the correct language or anything like that. And so it's very hard to disseminate information to almost everybody. And so I think that's also the problem. So that also we need to think about what public perception, if someone's looking out their window and they see an ICE officer and a police officer, and have not heard anything about the information that is being brought out, what are they going to think about? And so I think that's important, because we struggle with that sometimes. There's changes in laws that are happening, especially in immigration, every day. And how do we get that information out to the people who most need it, who are the people who are not actively involved in organizations or groups? And so I think it's important to just strip down and say, okay, if I look at my window and I see this, what am I thinking about? And that risk could be mitigated if the police had very substantial ways. Okay, we can intercede in this way, we can bring out the video camera footage in this way, but I don't have the answers to those questions, and I think it just needs a little bit more thought. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I know it looks like there are a couple more folks who have questions
Just-
and comments, but then we'll wrap it up.
Just for a point of clarification, tell me again the difference between the administrative order and the judicial, the one that the judge. What exactly is the difference? What does it look like that makes it different?
The difference, I didn't bring. We actually have some sheets that show the difference. The basic difference is that one is signed by an ICE officer who has never been a judge. And so administrative warrants do not need judge signature. So judges haven't looked at it. And then the judicial order is signed by a judge. So it'll say on
Oh, I got
the roll.
that part. So you show up at somebody's door with one of the others.
Mm-hmm.
If you show up with the one not signed by the judge, what does a person do? I mean, isn't that a legal instrument as well?
No, ICE can't come into your home if they have an
All right,
administrative
so you
warrant.
should not answer that, but that has nothing
Yes.
to do with the police.
It's also if ICE comes up and says, "Hey, we have a warrant for this person's arrest. Will you help us out?" If it's a judicial warrant, the legalities of that is it's a federal order, and so it's different. But if it's an administrative warrant, it's more like a detainer request. It's more like ICE is saying, "Okay, we have someone, help us out with this," but there's no obligation. And specifically under Francis, they made that clear that the administrative warrants function similarly to detainer requests when looking at local government. Does that make sense?
You seem to be leaning forward.
Thank you. It was very informative and to see a lot of stuff that happens in just throughout the country itself. You did say you work with other municipalities. What other municipalities have you worked with?
So a little bit about me. I just started in New York. I came from Alabama. So we worked with a couple municipalities like Tuskegee. We didn't have too much because a lot of the municipalities there did not invite us to speak at their meetings. But we've done work as the ACLU organizationally across the country in many different municipalities.
What about Westchester area? Not you specifically, but the organization itself. What other municipality have you guys worked with?
I couldn't say that off the top of my head, but I know that we worked to pass the Immigrant Protection Act in Westchester County. I know that we've done, and I know that we worked on a couple others, but I couldn't name them. Sorry.
So let's say the government and all these municipalities do not invite you, your organization. What is that as an organization itself? Because there's a lot of groups, and I can name two right now, which I'm not going to do, that they do a lot for the immigrant community.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that you guys have done? Reach out to, different churches, different committees within the community, educate them. Just like you said, there's two different orders, your judicial and administrative. So how does you entity itself does that to the community, to the immigrant community? How does that help?
Yeah, so we definitely don't work in a silo. We work with a lot of the local community groups in Westchester, in New York, and nationally too. And so in places where the local government hasn't invited us to come speak, there's usually a grassroots organizing component where people will get together, will meet with their sheriffs or meet with local officials and ask for some form of a disentanglement policy. It looks different for every place, but we're definitely not the only group that is disseminating the information about the warrants, and we're definitely not the only group who's working on disentanglement policies. And a lot of times we work in coalition because we know that it's super important to have a great coalition of people. Did that answer your question?
Thanks. And actually, I had spoken with another member of your department before you arrived, and I know that you have your organization has worked with Neighbors Link here in Ossining, and the Know Your Rights programs that have been conducted in our community are typically by Neighbors Link. And one of the advantages to having Neighbors Link here is also their legal staff is located right here in Ossining, and they can assist people who have legal questions. I did want to tell you that after you and I spoke, we talked about detainer requests, and we talked about judicial versus administrative warrants. I did have a conversation with our chief of police, and but I don't feel like I didn't take good notes, and I'm not knowledgeable enough to reiterate, and I don't want to misrepresent. But I will just briefly say they hadn't been receiving detainer requests, and I just want to clarify for anybody who's watching, and I'm going to ask the chief to watch this meeting so that he can speak with us about many of the questions that you suggested, so that we can have an informed next step whenever we take this up again. But when ICE comes in, whether we're observing or not, in a lot of communities, they don't even notify the local department. They have not to this point. presented our department with either warrant and said, we want your help. They've just let us know that they were here and let us know where they were going. And then it's up to our department, and their policy at this point is to observe. And so the paperwork hasn't been presented. So there hasn't, because they couldn't stop them anyway. ICE is going to do what they're going to do. OPD can't say, you can't do that. We don't approve that paperwork, because we don't have oversight. Nobody in the village of Ossining has oversight over a federal law enforcement agency. But thank you very much for offering so much information and for coming with us, being with us this evening to provide us with so much to think about. And I appreciate your time. And if there's no other questions, then please do email us some of those resources. I think we may have gotten them a little while in the past, but now that we've actually gotten to hear from you in person, it'd be great if you could just refresh them in our inboxes and we can share them around and see any future conversations can be informed by them.
Great, will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have a discussion of the contract for a new roof at the Ossining Fire Department headquarters. And I see Scott Gallery, Russ Watsky, who's Michael.
Please join us,
Garduzio,
Mr. Watsky and our chiefs.
Who's coming up for
Any
this?
and all who have anything to inform us with.
You're all invited.
And we do ask that you use the microphone, not for us in the room, we can hear you fine, but it's for the folks at home. That's why we keep turning our mics on and off.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm here to support the efforts on behalf of the fire department to solve a problem that's been going on for many years at the fire headquarters on State Street. There's a section of the roof that is flat, and it's been very problematic. It's been leaking for years. They've been patching it many times. I was asked back in October to prepare a bid package to get pricing for replacement of this roof. And this package got sent out. If you want to take a look at this, you're welcome to see what was sent out to the selected bidders. I kept it as simple as I could because we were trying to avoid the need to go out to public bid with all the difficulties that come along with that. So the trigger point is $35,000 to go to public bid, and the bids came in, 2 of them under 35, 1 of them a little bit over, and 1, forget about it, it was out of line. So we're ready to award the contract to a company that I've worked with before. I'm very pleased with the work that they do. They're ready to get on this fairly quickly, so this gets resolved finally. If you have any questions about it, I'm happy to do what I can to answer.
No, my only question would really be, Stuart, it sounds like it almost rose to the level of needing to go out in a formal bid process. Are you comfortable with the approach that was taken?
And Russ has been good enough to send me the form of the contract. I've made a couple of corrections. We've already gotten one of the insurance forms. We're waiting to get the other insurance forms, but it all looks fine.
What is the size of this area to be repaired? I don't have time to read this or look at it since we're just looking at it now.
It's about 2,000 square feet.
2,000, and it's all flat. 2,000 square feet flat.
Yes, that's the flat part. We're not doing anything with the slope part of the building. Just in the middle, there's a flat section.
Okay, and how do you get up there?
There's a door that leads right up onto the roof.
So 3 years ago, I had asked that when repairs be done, that we look into having green gardens so that it actually creates an energy environment that has been proven all over New York City, especially Brooklyn, to be highly efficient. It prevents seepage of water. It looks good. And because this is flat, it actually would qualify for a green garden. Did you look at a green garden option, or are you just repairing the existing scenario?
Our first objective was to stop the leaks, and then the second one was to get it in for a low enough number not to have to go to public bid. So the system that I specified is a synthetic rubber membrane, and after that's in place, you can add vegetated areas to that roof if you want.
Are you familiar with green gardens?
Yes. You can add planters and things on this roof later on if you want to do that.
I would agree. Okay. So, like 3 years ago, I had all the people here and I asked, that's not what a green garden is. It's not putting planters on the top of a roof. That's just not what they are. And actually they're designed to exactly solve for water seepage. And the requirement is flat. The requirement is that you can get on there, not because people have to take care of it. In fact, green gardens need almost no maintenance. That is the point of green gardens. They're not for gardening. Actually, they're for roofs and to keep heat in. It actually will save on energy usage. That's actually the whole point of them. So my only thing is that I totally get your objective. My dilemma is that when I sit here and I ask people for stuff, and then when the opportunity comes, it's like I never said it. Like, I don't know what to do with this, because I totally get where you're coming from, and I'm in total agreement with you on one hand. On the other hand, I'm sort of upset that when I ask for stuff, it like doesn't even get dealt with by anybody, because it doesn't seem to have gone anyway. So I don't actually know what to do with this. I mean, it's not a question of your objections and your objectives. I mean, they're totally reasonable. So, hello,
Good evening,
how are you?
Chief Gallery. I was in that meeting, Rika. This roof we explained to you the roofs that would qualify for that in the department, which would be hollow hose, engine 100, possibly monitor hose. This roof is 2,000 square feet. Out of that 2,000, has 4 air handlers on there. It has a staircase, and it's completely enclosed with the rest of the building around it. So I don't think it'll be feasible to do what you want to do. And I think we mentioned that when we had the conversation last time. This is a small roof.
Okay.
It's not a big roof. It sounds big, 2,000 square feet, but it's got the air handlers all on one side. So I don't think it's equipped to do what you want to do. And what he explained as far as with the rubber membrane, you can still put your system on top of this. It's basically what goes underneath what you're going to install.
Well, you're saying it won't work there anyway.
It's the other roofs of the buildings are closing it in. The only open
So not
side
this
on
one,
it is
but
the north side, which would be no sun whatsoever. And then you put the air handlers in, and minus that from the square footage, it's not a big roof at all. Really isn't. Hollow hose and monitor hose are the only 2 roofs that would be good for what you want to do. The rest of headquarters are pitched roofs. North side is a pitched
Well, the
roof.
pitch you can't. That's
That's what I'm saying. So the only ones that are available for us to do that, which we're going to bring up again in the beginning of the year, is monitor hose, which needs to be replaced. And the option is there for that.
I'm getting a Google now. I'm just going to look at it. Although I believe him, so that's
So
not
this
really-
is State Street.
right.
That's where the trucks are, and this is pitched. This is pitched. This is the flat part.
Right,
that
so it's
apparently
surrounded
is-
by it.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
none
closed.
Of us are experts on
No.
where's an appropriate place to have a green roof, and unfortunately, that question wasn't asked by an expert who could have reassured us that this
Right.
isn't it. This isn't it.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't be against it. I just don't think it's feasible there. It's
No.
not big enough.
Okay, so somewhere, I appreciate that you remember it, and, I'm always.
I remember the conversation because
Yeah.
we recommended hollow hose and monitor hose if possible.
Yeah, I just thought this one actually did, and, been in Brooklyn recently, and they've done amazing work. I mean, they're written all over the world about what they're doing, and these are old buildings. They're very similar. Surrounded, they're in a city. They're doing amazing stuff. It's like 45 minutes from here. So, I appreciate that you know it. I'm gonna bring it up again in a different way. I don't want to get into a thing here.
You'll have your chance when we talk about monitor.
Oh, good. And pretty sure it's going to put you over your $35,000. They're supposed to be long-term solutions. I will ask the village manager, though, to going forward to add to her list of 99 things that she will be adding 100, because I would like somebody to look in total at the buildings. I have no intention of spending more money than necessary. I do have an intention in the long term to green Ossining and to benefit from the energy use, whether it's solar or whether it's green roofs. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
The intention, I imagine, is to get this done before the winter.
Yep.
Yes. So we need the board's approval
Under the
to
capital
have the
office.
village manager or Stu sign the contract for it, and we can get it done. It's leaking real bad. It's doing a lot of damage to inside the building.
That's the point it's got to, where we have to put garbage cans there, tarps. That's how bad it's leaking.
And this didn't go into capital because it's too, right? This is the first time you're requesting this, yeah?
Yes, for this roof. Monitor hose, but this one's priority. It's more important.
Didn't we know about this? I mean, it doesn't sound like it just happened. I'm surprised that we haven't.
We knew about this. We put in for both roofs at the same time.
Last year.
I forget exactly. I don't know exactly what the money was allotted
I'm
for.
surprised it's just coming to us like.
It
Anyway, it has to be.
It was the money allotted
it
for
was-
this project.
It was
Okay.
Manny, I think, pretty sure Manny talked about it in the presentation the other night.
And it's in the capital, so it's in
No, but
the,
it wasn't. It wasn't in the
This budget.
2019. I'm just because I mean this didn't happen this fall.
I'd have to
It
go
happened-
back.
It's obviously been built.
You know,
I'd
we
have
had
to go back and
approvals
look at
for
what
it. There
it
was
was. It may
money
have been-
allotted for this already.
That's how you
Yeah.
put the bid together, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you're saying what, the money was allotted for it in the 2019 budget?
For actually, I think, don't hold me to it. I want to say 60,000 was allotted for the two projects, but this one was more important to
I
us.
just don't know. It would be, the typical structure would be we talked about it a year ago and it was put in the 2019 budget as a capital project. Was that the case?
I'd have to go back and
They're
look.
not putting it to bid, that's-
Chief, I have a quick question. How old is the building?
We can, Tom will be down in a minute and we can, I just, I don't remember.
2006.
So what is the warranty on a typical roof like that?
I think this roof only had a 10-year warranty on it.
So we passed that.
We're definitely past that. It wasn't a very good installation to begin with. It was a problematic roof from the
From
very
the
start.
beginning. And that's, I'm not gonna get into that, but
Yeah.
so now, what is the warranty that the contractor is gonna be performing for this particular case?
The contractor will warranty the roof for 5 years for labor and material.
Right.
And
What is the warranty for
The manufacturer's warranty will be a material warranty for 20 years.
for 20 years, as long as the contractor install as per manufacturer's requirements?
Yes, well, that we're going to make sure that happens.
That's my take based on
The way they're
previous
doing it
experience in
is
this particular building.
not the way they
How
originally
do we
asked for it.
ensure that we're gonna make sure that we insure this? So I wouldn't want you guys to come back in another, before 5 years, have the same issue that we're having now, or that you guys are having now with headquarters. So is there inspections gonna get done? All that stuff is part of the contract? Is that the language stored that the contractor is to install this roof as per manufacturer's recommendations?
The manufacturer specs are part of the contract.
Yes,
And
Which
there-
that's the drawings that are included in the bid
that is
package.
correct. And there's a separate roofer's warranty.
Correct.
Which obligates the roofer to do certain things.
and I'll be inspecting the work in
What I
progress.
noticed from the photos, you have peat gravel on the roof, but the details on that one doesn't have that. So you're just going for ETPM all the way through as a flat roof?
That's exactly right. I specifically want to get rid of that gravel
Okay.
because that's a big part of the problem. People step on it, it makes holes in the roof, and then you can't find the hole to fix it.
Correct.
So we're getting rid of that.
That was my.
That's right.
So now, are you raising the curves as well, or you just leaving the curves as they are right now?
They're high enough.
They're high enough that
Yeah.
because there's a minimum, as you know,
Yes.
there's a minimum height that you have to provide for snow build out and all the other stuff.
That's right. Yeah, we're good.
Would love to see a green roof. I agree with Rika, but
Yeah, I didn't
Well,
realize the
you
building.
can you can still vegetate. You can still
I mean,
install
there's-
vegetated
as
roof
the
on
chief
this.
mentioned, there's obviously there's layers that you can build in, and that's
Yes.
sort of like the waterproof part, and then you can build on top of that and keep building. It's just my concern with that will be, does the framing on the roof allows? What kind of load does it allow? So that's
Well,
something
you'd have to
again,
look at
we
that.
don't- yeah.
But we're getting rid of the 10 pounds a square foot of
That is
gravel that's
correct.
on there now, so we have something to work with.
Okay, so what I am seeing here, did you come down, Tom, what I'm seeing here in the 2019 budget, on page 3 of the capital projects is actually, all that I see is 2018, there was $120,000 put in for firehouse roof repairs. Was that this?
From what I recall, there was 2 years in a row that 60,000 was put in the first year, like maybe 2017, and then another 60 was put in the second year in 2018. And I know that there was a couple of different firehouse roofs that were discussed. I know the hollow hose was discussed. And also, I remember when we took the tour of the firehouses, we were looking specifically at the problems at the 21 State Street, the fire headquarters, which is this contract. So that's what I know about the projects and where the money came from.
Okay, so obviously this needs to get done, and we certainly don't want our
Right.
roof to be leaking, so we're gonna move, I mean, unless others have another, suggestion, I think we'll move forward with whatever approval is necessary so that this work can be done, so we don't have a roof falling in on our fire headquarters. That would be ridiculous. I would like in the future to have, I mean, we just met days ago with the chiefs about
Yeah.
what are the plans, and, this 120,000 that was in the 2018 adopted capital project. It sounds like there's a few roofs that have some things that need to be addressed, and we've had some really general conversations about what roofs might be good candidates for something more that do double duty, not just keep the rain out, but actually provide for energy efficiency and making more sustainable use of our rooftops. And that's something that we definitely want to consider for the next roof project. So we at least want that to be explored. And I also don't want to be in a position where we're making a decision about how we're going out to bid based on the fact that we don't want to go through a formal bid process. I mean, that's no way to do business, to try and keep something under a certain dollar amount. I understand, you know, municipal government is a stickler for process, but you know, we're municipal government, so let's have a more thoughtful conversation about what comes next. I don't want to be discussing the next roof that needs to be done next week without having already gone through all of these. So whether it's Monitor or Hollow, whatever's next, let's talk about that and have it in the capital project. I mean, we haven't adopted the 2020 capital project yet, so if there's something that should be designed this year, then let's put it in the capital projects for 2020. And if you can anticipate, you know, we're going to look at Monitor in 2020, then we're going to do the work in 2021, and we're going to look at Hollow Hose, whatever that is, let's put it in so that we're really making thoughtful decisions and we can be excited about it rather than under the gun to just approve something to get it done before the roof falls in. I'm not really talking to you, Russ, because you just get called in when and you know, you fulfill all of our requests as needed, and we're grateful for your expertise in roofs. You've been very helpful to the village.
That's why they put you first when you asked, don't you guys want to go up?
Okay. So
We got that.
so what is the timeline? Do we need to approve this? Like, do we need to go into legislative session tonight and approve this, or we can put it on next week?
Resolution at the next meeting.
Okay, great. So you'll have the resolution next week, and I don't see that at that point it'll be controversial. And but before we do the adopted budget, let's reconnect and have a conversation about what are the capital projects that we should be including.
Monitor.
All right.
Monitor hose is the only one that's in need of repair at this point.
Okay, but what we need to do is we need to put it in the
Capital
capital
for
projects in the
220.
proper year of what's going to happen, what's the right amount. Are we just doing a design in 2020, or, you know, like, let's
Okay.
put that in. And we usually do capital projects, you know, out. We've got in last year's we did 20, 20, 20, you know, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So, like, if
Yeah, we usually do
we have a lot
5
of
years
buildings,
ahead.
so yeah, you know,
Okay.
like, tell us the sequence you want, and we're not beholden to it. So just
Oh,
what
no,
would be
that's
your
fine.
ideal, and then we'll plan for it appropriately.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chiefs.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
Chief.
night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you, Russell.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite our recreation superintendent, Bill Garrison, up to discuss. Oh, I'm sorry.
We're taking a minute
I'm
break.
inviting Bill Garrison up to talk about the Youth Bureau, but we're going to be setting up the presentation.
Let Omar play with the lights.
Talk to
Shows he
the,
wants to play with the lights. Oh, good one. This is actually perfect. That's routine.
No, wait till
You need it, put it on something?
right there. Ossining Youth Bureau presentation? Yay!
See it. Otherwise, we can't see.
Okay, so where did the mayor go? So I just wanted to give a little presentation. At the last time we met, we were talking about the Youth Bureau, and people had some different ideas about what the Youth Bureau is. So did a little bit of research, and basically, Youth Bureau differs from a recreation program, and that's one of the benefits of having a Youth Bureau. Youth Bureau focuses more on youth-centered programming, goes beyond what the Recreation and Parks departments would do, provides programs that aren't sometimes, or most of the time, not even recreation in nature. They're more about development with leadership and job support, education support. And I'll get more into the program in a little bit. What a Youth Bureau does, an advantage of that, other than providing that program, is the opportunity for the municipality to receive grant funding that normally would not be available to municipality. So when OCFS puts out a grant for an after-school advantage grant, non-for-profits can apply for that grant, but the village of Ossining or town of Ossining could not do that. As a Youth Bureau, we would then be able to reach out and try to get those monies. This is just a kind of a sample of a mission statement. With the focus is to connect youth to positive services and programs. And then there's a whole array of types of services and programs that a Youth Bureau could provide. What's interesting is that there hasn't been a new Youth Bureau in New York State since 2013. So this would kind of be a really neat thing that if we were able to get a Youth Bureau going here, it'd be great press to launch Austin's newest department and program. The County Youth Bureau will provide the support and guidance for the village as they go through the process to set up a Youth Bureau. There is no formal application. Actually, the process to become a Youth Bureau has changed in the state. And there's still some questions and uncertainty about how that would go. And the county has assured us that they would help us through navigate that process. How do I go back, Jamie? How about I go? Oh. And that concludes my. Oh, the roller. Yeah, got it. Okay, is that where you want?
I'm really surprised at this. This means the first new one. There must be youth bureaus in.
Right. There hasn't been one established in the state of New York since two. Right.
Do you know how many youth bureaus there are in Westchester?
In Westchester, I'm not sure the exact number. I believe Port Chester, New Rochelle, Peekskill, White Plains, Yonkers, I believe are the only ones.
Greenberg has, I don't know if that's technically
right.
Because there's one of the things that makes a youth bureau is that the town or village has to have at least 20,000 people or more. So I don't know. Right? Yeah. So there's like a whole thing for designated.
Right.
Yeah.
I've just heard you speak about it.
Yes.
Okay. So the process to create a youth bureau is that it does take a resolution by the board to create a youth bureau. So that would have to be a resolution. It would go into the code. We would have to develop a youth board bylaws and create a youth board. And there are, according to the bylaws, a certain number of people. I believe there's 2 youth that have to be on that. What the powers of the board are would be determined by the bylaws. We'd also have to create a youth board. We'd want to create a youth council, hire a director. We would, once that director was hired, is to conduct a needs assessment in the community to see what services the community is in need of. We invite stakeholders into this process, tried to get as many people who have, and what I found is a lot of organizations within the community of Ossining have the same desire about working with children and with kids. So getting those people together and coming up with ideas to support that whole process. And again, the county would help shepherd this through this whole process. So it is a lot of steps. It's not overwhelming. It's a process that would be to undergo. In speaking with the county, the director of the county youth bureau has provided with some examples of bylaws from other communities, so we can take a look at that. So you're not creating this right from scratch. We can take a lot of that, what's already been out there, and kind of adopt it or adapt it to what we want here in Ossining. Funding. So we've put into the 2020 budget requests funding that would basically fund a director and a worker, along with some startup costs of computers, materials, and supplies. We could also request additional funding and support from the county and state representatives. They may be able to help provide some additional funding that could help in our startup process. And once we get up and going, we can then seek grant funding for future programs. The county has a grant that they do. It's a 3-year grant called Invest in Kids. That is about a $70,000 or $75,000 program per year. And if you get that, then you can create some programs within that. So other programs that, what's great about the Youth Bureau is these are different types of programs that different youth bureaus do. One that I like, and I've had some experience doing in the past, is the summer youth employment. It's probably one of the most powerful things, and ones that the kids, you can really connect with the kids. But it's working with employers within the community to hire youth up to 20 hours a week during the summer, and they work in the businesses, and they get paid. They get paid minimum wage, and it gives the kids a summer job, so they get some money, but also gives them that for many of them, their first time work experience. A lot of other programs, as an example of Peekskill did a youth expo. There are different types of job readiness fairs that youth bureaus provide. Work readiness programs, like I said, civil engagement, lots of leadership types of programs, mentorships. Many of the programs, youth bureau programs, also work with other organizations and partner so that you can create more and more outreach to the community. So there's lots of different types of things that a youth bureau can provide up and beyond what the Recreation and Parks Department currently provides. So these are just some pictures from different youth bureaus and some of the stuff that they've kind of put out there. But it's kind of what's great about it is that it's open to many ideas. There are recreation components to it. There are family components to it. There's a possibility that down the road you could do a youth court. I understand there was a youth court in Ossining years ago. So that's another idea. So, questions?
What are the typical age group?
Yeah.
Always a funny word.
So what a lot of some communities, their youth bureau has an after-school program component to it, so it's more like the elementary group. But we have that already. So you can kind of curtail the youth bureau to what you see as the needs of your community. Just a general, from my observations, is that middle school teen age that I think would want to target initially. And a lot of that too is going to depend on the funding that you get and what's out there. There are after-school grants, so if you did get an after-school grant, maybe that would be for older elementary kids, and you could provide for that. So a lot of the programming will be determined by the type of funding you get. But other programming, we want to seek specific funding for teens or disconnected youth or support for work readiness or health, mental health connections.
Just to piggyback on some of that, if you go to the Mount Vernon Youth Bureau website, you'll see that their target range is 5 to 24. And so the executive director who would come here, of course, would, as Bill has plainly said, you know, the lack of programming is really from that 13 on up. So maybe in the first year, that'll be the focus. And then as you start to get bigger and you start to get more grants, you know, by the time you get to the, you know, addressing people at age 24, that's really more workforce development and things like that. So, you know, if you,
5-year-olds.
yeah, or 5-year-olds, right? And so it's
Like everybody.
yeah. So it's intended really to really answer, be the conduit to really the whole family. But you know, based on the funding, will determine how far and how expansive you can be. And this is just a great picture. I'm seeing young men.
One of them?
No. So if you see at this top corner right here, with these young top left hand corner, these young men are from Saturday Academy, which is the White Plains Youth Bureau. I know those young men, but it's been quite some time. So
They're not.
Yeah. So they're probably hopefully they've graduated by this time.
Yeah.
But you know, I definitely remember those young men.
Any other questions?
Oh.
Do you still have more slides?
No, that's it.
Nice slide.
I didn't want to go overload on that, but just to start the discussion.
I also have
You have a presentation? Okay.
a video. It's YouTube then, but yeah.
Is that our last screen for the day? Nope.
No, apparently you video of some sort.
So, Bill, you said 2013. That was the last youth bureau that was created with
Right.
the state of New York. At that time, do you know what kind of funding the state or the county provided to that particular municipality?
From my understanding is that there was never, going way back decades ago, that there are some youth bureaus that had an agreement where the state would do matching funds, but that they did away with decades ago. So the state would probably, like Ithaca was one of the first youth bureaus, and they've got matching funds from the state. I believe still do. Going on, you know, more current recently, the counties were not providing funding for youth bureaus. They were providing opportunities for grants, like Westchester provides the Invest in Kids opportunities. So where you might get funding from the county is from your local representatives that have the ability to provide some funding for certain programs that they could give to local municipalities.
I don't know if you know this on the top of your head. Let's say Portchester, because we go to always kind of compare it to Portchester. What is the funding for the youth program there?
I didn't look at Portchester. I went to Peekskill.
What is the funding of Peekskill?
Peekskill is, I believe it was 200,000. But a lot of their expenses for their buildings are put into that budget, so it's not an apples to apples comparison. Their staff similarly, and they've got some grants, so those grants are included in their budget.
What's the
But-
question? What kind of grants? How much in grants or how much it costs?
Are you talking about the annual budget?
Yeah.
I'm talking about
The
just
total operating
total
budget.
operating budget
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
itself. And
So-
and
Not
you're right,
200,000.
and that was my next question. How
Oh,
much of a grant do they get to
Right.
offset the $200,000
Right.
operation part of that? So you sort of answered that. So, community center, because I'm assuming the youth center is going to be based out of the community center. And as we all know here, the community center needs a lot of work in some different areas, and how do we multi-purpose areas and a lot of renovations, and I know you've been doing a lot of that stuff already. But is it ready? Let's say right now the board says next week we agree on everything, we have the budget, we have the funding, we hire a director. Is the community center ready for that, for this particular?
We'd have to be creative. I think there's a discussion about with the Sing Sing Museum coming online and what's going to happen with the exhibit that's currently at the community center and the exhibit of the aqueduct. That is a large space that mainly goes unused, frankly. It's not utilized well. So I think that would warrant some discussion there. But going, to answer your question, we would have to get creative and look at the space that we have in the community center and figure out how to make it work.
We're not 100% ready.
We're not even a little bit ready.
Yeah, no, I think, like if we said, okay, we're going to hire somebody, where would the director sit and where would their office be? No, we haven't gotten that far. But I think, we can make it happen. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think long-term ideal, like if we had that extra space available, that would make a great youth borough area. It's large enough to put some offices in there. I would love to see like a cafe area where kids could kind of just hang out, and a stage where you could have some presentations or speakers or mentors coming in, place where kids and adults can meet, have something to eat, have music, open mic nights. I think there's a lot of things you could do here that a youth borough could sponsor that don't cost a lot of money to bring these things in and bring people in from the community to connect with kids. And that's a lot of what I see as a youth borough does is about making these connections so that kids then have these opportunities to realize, hey, I know I can go to this person for help. And I know that this person, oh, gee, I didn't know I could do this. And that's what the youth borough will be able to provide. But given the space that we have there, maybe we take a look at the art room, and how that's utilized and see if we need to do that differently. I don't know. Open for ideas for sure.
I would also say that if you look at different communities, so for example, the city of Peekskill actually has a physical space, but the city of White Plains, most of their programming is ran out of their schools. So when we're talking about office space is one thing, but the actual programming itself, what they found, and again, they've been at this thing for 50 years, but once, the kids never go home. And so therefore, once you have them looped into the school, it's not a question about, whether or not one comes into the little teen lounge that they have available at the little gym. Also, what we've done so far, you've been on the board, is, the one program that we did fund, we use the library. So when it comes to programming space, we might have more options than we think we do now.
Yep.
When it comes to the actual,
It's the physical stuff. Like if you think of it as a recreational, that requires lots of space. But people can meet here if they needed to have some sort of whatever.
Program, yeah.
It's something else that, and thank you for giving us a little more of a, an overview, because not everybody's been in some of these
my
meetings,
first-
and this is a good encapsulation of a lot of the information. And we did put some money in the budget so that we can get this off the ground this year. I will say, when we talk about space, the Sing Sing Prison Museum, they have bigger and better plans than being in that space, and really that building could be utilized is perhaps more appropriately utilized for a youth bureau than what it's been used for the museum project. The hope is that the preview center
We'll get a new chair.
yeah
That's cute.
the hope is that the preview center will open in 2020, so anything that we can do in our and to help the Sing Sing Prison Museum get that transition to their new location will just make it that much of a smoother transition for them to be out of that space so that we can repurpose it for the Youth Bureau. But I also think, and this is one of the conversations that I've had with some of the representatives from the county, is, Ossining is one of the differences between us as a village and some of the cities is that the population that we serve is not the entire school district. And yet the school buildings could be a wonderful location for some of these after school programs to take place, particularly at the high school or at Park School, which is very walkable to so many people. And while I realize the majority of the people who are likely to take advantage of these programming opportunities are going to live in the village, I'm sure that the school district wouldn't want to be exclusionary for somebody who lives in the unincorporated town or in the village of Briarcliff or whatever if they wanted to participate in one of these programs. And perhaps the school could have a formal relationship with the youth bureau. This is the kind of stuff we need to understand before we move forward. It's a village project. It's directed by the village. It's managed by the village. But if it's a project that's going to be open to anybody in the Ossining greater community, then perhaps a pathway for making that a financially responsible decision would be that the school would have in-kind contribution and they would be contributing X amount of classroom space or fields or gyms or whatever it is in the afternoons and evenings for these programs when they have, you know, more flexibility in their space and we're still jam-packed with afternoon and evening programs. You know, anything. I love the idea of there being an office and a small cafe gathering space. That's wonderful. I think that's lovely. But, you know, ideally this will be a robust program that will have, you know, many things
Many
happening
venues.
throughout the years, and so and the school buildings really are an optimal. That would be an optimal use for it. That seems like a nice sharing of services. And we've had a lot of sharing of services with the schools, and this might be the first time we put it in writing, and I'd feel really good about that. So, so this there could be some ancillary benefits to going down this path. I would like to understand that 200,000, using that example for Peak Skill. You know, I would imagine that their staff and programming actually is much more than 200,000, and that's the amount that they have in their city budget that's dedicated to the program, and then they get lots of grant money for the actual program.
I can tell you offhand, the executive director, about 90, their youth advocate person, about 57, and then potentially have 2 part-time folks.
Yeah.
So-
Okay.
Well,
So
that's
with
just-
if anybody's getting any benefit or there's
Right.
operations,
Yeah,
so
so
that's
that's over
more than
200,000.
200,000.
Yeah, that's
So
over
so that's being
200,000.
offset by grants, and that doesn't even start paying for any programming. So
Pretty much.
yeah.
Yeah, but- so let me
In the
ask you this.
cafe.
So
Can I just very quickly?
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, mine. Just for clarity, does the Singleton Prison Museum nonprofit? Because for those who are watching, we're a partnership with a nonprofit. That's how it's happening, and we support it. So, do they They don't currently operate our museum, though, right? Isn't that completely separate? That's
Yeah,
village.
that predated that ever
Right.
being an
Yeah.
organization.
But of course,
I have no idea who has ownership or responsibility for the artifacts and the material that's in there. Do you know?
The state
Okay.
owns some of it, and we
We have an annual
We have
agreement
a-
for the
yes.
cell door.
Okay.
We have to insure it.
no. All right, cool. And then
Good.
it is good to know. Okay, thank you. And the second part was just to echo. What?
No, I was wondering if there was any money involved in this relationship.
I doubt it. The second part was we already do a pretty good job. I mean, obviously, we would love it in writing going forward, but the schools are busy and do have a lot of programming. But we have over a few years we have seen that it works pretty well. We use fields. They use fields. We use schools for camps. And it's worked pretty well. So it'd be great to have a conversation just to how to expand that, whether it's in kind or in agreement. And the missions align here, as it's my opinion, but hand in hand. So
Question: did the county provide a model resolution that the board would have to enact?
She did not send me one, but we can. You can go and look on. We can look on the code. I mean, I did look at Portchester.
Okay.
So in their code, they have a resolution and how they created.
And just to allay some of the rumors in the village, could you tell me if anybody at county guaranteed monies for this project? And I heard you say they will help us
No.
secure grants.
there's
Is anybody
no
actually
there's
because
no
they're-
guarantee
because
of
people
funding.
are walking around with, you know, George said this and Catherine said that.
there's
Everybody's
no
all of a
guarantee
sudden
of
on a first
funding.
name basis here. Okay.
No, there's
There's
nothing.
no guarantee of funding. That was made
That's it.
abundantly clear by those same individuals.
I just
So-
want that for the record so that I will refer to this moment in time of 18 because that's driving a lot of conversation. And it's just, they can't. There's no way they could have said that. So, okay.
Okay. Bill, thanks so much.
All right,
Bill, this
thank you.
was very helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. It was a great
Sure.
presentation.
It's a
Very
good,
helpful, and
it's a
thank you
good
for your
beginning.
patience this evening.
Karen, I just have a simple question. Usually needs analysis and bullets like go sort of on the top, and then you go to all those other bullets like the board and the council and the funding and and one. Is the needs analysis more not whether you should have one, or and therefore it comes farther down the line? It's more of a needs analysis because we've spent a lot of money on needs analysis and stuff. But is it more like, should we do, certain age group? Should we do more outdoor versus? Is that what a needs analysis is, or is it? Or am I getting too in the weeds even asking this question?
It's more like if the community there was a high rate of binge drinking going on in the schools, that would come out and say, okay, what kind of money can we go and find, or programs can we
So
develop?
it is. It's like
address
once
those
you
issues.
get into like we want to have one.
Right.
Then it's
Sort of the shape and
establishing.
size. Now it's like we're doing like 14 to 18-year-olds to learn whatever.
So
and
you could
12-year-olds to stay off drinking or whatever your needs are.
So the program, the needs analysis is going to be critically
I know.
important because of the funding. So once you determine what the key issues are for your community, that's what you base for your case for support when you're going out for grant funding. So that's where it plays
That's
in.
actually a little bit of lifting because you have some homework to be done.
Yeah, and that is one thing that the county made pretty clear in all the presentations, that the model is to identify somebody who will be good at going after that funding, because that's how it becomes a self-sustaining program.
You're not doing this for a year.
Right.
This isn't like, oh, let's try it out for a couple of months and see, what happens. I mean, you got to think 3 to 5 to 10 years. Otherwise, it fails because you're not having that long. You got to have a long-term vision. Otherwise, what are you doing?
So it's not necessarily that you hit the ground running with programs, but you hire somebody who's to start cultivating the support for those programs and the funding for those programs.
Good stuff.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
You're up next.
All right. I think we have another little video interlude here, break, and but I'd like I don't know. I'm getting very tired. I'd like to invite Trustee Elmer Herrera up here to discuss his language access policy. His language access policy recommendation.
Want me to talk about it? It's every state agency.
Can you start presenting it now? We'll be done sometime next week.
Oh, you just let me know when.
Oh, we don't have internet. Okay, because this looks like no connection.
What, down here?
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Let's see. Program internet. So sorry. I didn't know that you needed the internet.
I assume this worked.
Me too.
Thank you, though.
Sorry.
That's interesting.
Well,
Well,
It's all right. We can talk.
Oh, you had a video for us, and that's not.
Yes.
It's not to be.
how many chargers is there?
are we on?
First of all, I didn't know there
Yes.
was a charger thing in here.
Yes, we're on, by the way.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's human.
Oh, actually, you know what? That is why.
No, is there internet wire down there? No, like in here.
Push down for up. Yes, doesn't make sense.
It is, but
Oh wow.
Finish your wire.
Okay, well, there's your internet.
What? You fixed it?
No,
No, I
no,
mean,
it's well,
If you want to
We see
highlight
why
it,
it's not connected.
yes, we see.
Probably because it was connected. Mystery solved, but problem not solved. You know, so that she could. Okay. They don't.
Okay, it's all right. We'll just discuss. That's fine. Are we good, Mayor Garrity?
Let's pretend we saw it. Recap what we just viewed.
Sure,
Trustee.
sure. So you just saw a very innovative, inspiring, award-winning video from the city of Houston, who, to my knowledge, of course, they're a city and a lot more people and much more diverse in languages, but really break down what would a full comprehensive language policy be. You saw how they had actual examples from actual residents going to the municipality as to what do you do, what do you not do. And then the other video that was in the show was just a vendor that actually works with municipalities and government throughout the country and in New York and here in Westchester that provides very basic, user-friendly teleservices for translation on spot at customer service counters, in addition to transcription services, whether it's for forms or notices. And I just kind of wanted us as a board and the public to see just how simple and easy it is once you make the determination as to whether we're going to transcribe, which is different than translate, keeping it all in context. And I'm assuming everyone here glanced at the 2-page policy proposal that I sent like 2 weeks ago. So we, believe it or not, would be, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, because I couldn't call every municipality in Westchester due to work, but would be the first municipality to create our own policy. The county passed one, and it's great, and I commend the entire team, but it's only applicable to county departments. The governor passed one in a executive order, which this proposed policy models. That's probably the main one that I would want us to model, which is why it's so similar. That's only relevant to state agencies and departments. They go a step further because it's a state government and they have bigger abilities and capacities, but they require that every department and agency from top to bottom submit a language access annual plan. And they measure it, they analyze it. There's deliverables depending on what their actual function is. But now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it. This particular proposal is a bit more streamlined because we're not a huge city, we're not a county, and we're not a state. So it was pretty easy to come up with 3 recommendations. So let's see. So this discussion would be having a discussion as to what the board feels is a vital document that has to be translated. They define that, the state and the federal order that is amongst federal agencies, they define that as good to public welfare when receiving services or applications. But obviously we're not a federal agency, so it's really up to us as to what we feel is relevant and or vital for our residents to have access or know or understand, regardless of their proficiency in language, whether they could speak a little, understand a little, talk with slang a little, read a little, write a little, but that everyone has the ability to receive a service or a process or an application in a way that has no barriers, but in a way that is this is now me, editorializing, in a way that is not so burdensome for taxpayers and also for staff as we try to be as efficient as possible. So the resolution / proposal refers to LEP, which represents limited English proficiency. Yes, this particular policy goes into the Spanish language. That is an assumption by the census a couple of years ago, and also by many reports, particularly the Westchester Children's Association, and also by experience that the majority of people that speak a language other than English in Ossining is Spanish. That's not to say that we don't acknowledge Portuguese, Italian, there's Filipino. There's a lot of other languages here too. What's great about having a conversation as to a vendor is that once we define what vital documents are and what departments we want to, I guess, start a pilot language access policy with, it could be any language that we use when it comes to it. It doesn't have to be what our staff knows or what our top 2 languages are. We could fully begin to see how a comprehensive policy would work. And that's kind of where our next steps would be to identify that. The departments that I identified as a starter, I'm going to go by department and then the areas. So department office of village manager would be, our board of trustees. So our local legislation, agendas, resolutions, and public hearing notices. Police department, CCRB complaint forms, overnight parking hardship waiver, towing correspondence or your rights. Public works would be one we already do, which is our sanitation and recycling schedule, and water quality reports that are issued and made in-house by us already. Building department, which we already had a conversation, so it's kind of ongoing. At first, I only had a few, but the mayor identified a lot of recommendations that I didn't even think of should be placed for a consideration as to transcription and or a translation. So everything from applications to permits to guidance forms, and they already started with the brochures. So it's not we're not starting from scratch in every department. This is just making it more comprehensive when it comes to the actual interactions from the public to the department. And of course, believe it or not, the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council, which has done an amazing job, our intake form is only in English. So just finding a way to making that also in Spanish. So 3 options. So what can we do to actually have a plan to implement this once we have a discussion as to what's vital? So the first one is telephonic interpreter services, right? So that's as simple as with this guidance and any other parameter that this board sets, asking for, I don't want to call them bids because it's not going to cost that much, but asking for some, recommendations and proposals from entities that work with municipalities on transcription and interpretation. And that's all going to determine what departments we use. So I would definitely love to see or have a discussion to consider telephonic interpreter services when someone goes to the customer service counter at the building department, at the Parks and Recreation department, if someone's not available or they don't have access or the ability to properly communicate in context. And the police department, there are telephonic services that for basic non-emergency calls and numbers can be dealt with. And that's just a couple of areas. Obviously, it could be expanded to all departments, but I wouldn't want to go over our head. I would kind of want to pick a couple first and see how it goes and measure it and go from there. Number 2, this is kind of already a practice that this board started more this year, the in-person, face-to-face interpreters. And that's also comes at our discretion, right? So these are people that we hire. They're professionals that we hire at an hourly basis. I believe the manager told me it was $20 an hour. Obviously,
No, for what I talked about, we were talking about,
transcription, was it? Depending on
Yeah.
on the vendor, but yeah.
but but it depends on what kind. It's just hiring a translator to do translation, but then there's also the other things where you have more involved or it's in real time.
Okay. So I won't.
It's different. I
Yes.
think that was just for like just a translator
Yeah.
in the courts.
Okay.
Not a human being, but
You know, just here, I just this what you're doing is you're sort of itemizing for us the thing that you emailed to us like 2 weeks ago, right? So you're publicly sharing with folks what was in the proposal that you shared with us 2 weeks ago. I mean, really, what you're pointing out is that there's a lot for us to consider and figure out, and work with staff to identify what can be done first and what should be the sequence, and how do we approach it. Do you have a recommendation of next steps? Because
I was
we're like
getting to that.
15 steps into it. Okay, good.
I was getting to that.
Go for it.
Yeah, I just had to, for the record, and also because besides you and Quantel, and maybe a little bit of Trustee Casada, I didn't really get any feedback or recommendations and or questions or concerns so I kind of wanted to put that opportunity again. So I did identify 2 vendors to learn about what it would cost for transcription and transcription services, but it's not appropriate for me to request a manager or take it amongst myself at this point to request for quotes because we haven't made a determination as to, which I would love to do tonight because it's really not hard, what we determine as a vital document that we would deem as necessary to translate. What would be a department that we would want to be the first 2 or 3 departments that have a telephonic service for interpretation. And the rest just goes into why we can't, why it's not appropriate nor acceptable, and has a lot of, liabilities to continue using or relying on Google Translate because it's not really meant for governmental and public service, whether it's services or programming. So that's the ask today. And because I would love to identify 2 vendors by next week and be able to break it down and have a conversation, but I'm not going to assume or take it amongst myself to request certain parameters for something that we just haven't discussed. So I asked to put it on the agenda today so we could actually just focus on those 2 questions. A, how do you guys feel about it? B, what's vital to you and why? And C, which departments can we try it out in?
Any comments and questions from the rest of the board?
So I'm definitely in support of your program. I think it's important. As I've looked at I'll give you one particular community, city of Newburgh. When you look at their agendas, they have pretty much, their resolutions is not as long as ours, but they but they pretty much have. I understand, but they have the English and the Spanish, at least a summary. So I think for the respects to I guess you had identified the village manager's office or our office, the office where people have most hopefully a lot of interaction with, definitely like the agendas and things like that. To Trustee Casada, I know you created a pamphlet with the building department some time ago. So whatever those things that are frequently used by community members, those to me those should be the things that are should be the focus.
I have a thought, but
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait. Do you want to just?
I guess so. Let's just go this way, I guess. So to answer one of your questions, Omar, obviously we did go over this in the building department and the level of intensity that we were going to go into details on the applications and how we want to go about that. We do have fortunately the one of the building inspector. He's actually a bilingual person, not certified, but he does help the Spanish community in that end. When he's available there, and if he's not, he makes himself available because I had conversations with him in regards to that. So the applications, and yes, there was some information that he outdated with a lot of the stuff and feedback from the board in regards to that. The police department does have a landline that is available for any language. if you know, as you know, we have many people in our department that speak different languages in our police department. If no one's available, they have the ability to have a call in there. So I think part of I'm supporter of this. Please don't disregard that. But I think we have to look at our departments, as you mentioned before, and what kind of level of services do we have, and we are providing already to our residents, and kind of and go from there. The other particular department that I think is essential for us is obviously the community center. You know, and how much the relationship and now we do have unfortunately people that do speak Spanish and in the community center as well, that they help our community in regards to all this. So I think for me to able to say we're gonna pass this and this is what we have to do, it'd be unfair to what our staff is already working on it, has been doing that for years. So I think I would like to understand a little bit better and how can we embrace what we're already doing and put that to the next level. I think that's part of I've been asking the village manager to help me understand that. I mean, the community center, I know a little bit. I don't know enough in regards to the staff and what the abilities that we can do. I know the police department and I know the building department. And obviously, as you know, DPW, they do a lot of that reach out as well. When someone calls, there's a person that does help with the translation as well. So I think we have that basis or the foundation. We just want to take it to the next level. And how do we do that?
So is there some way we can, you know, because as you were talking, is there some way we can codify this? Because I think you know, that's important, you know, because, you know, we could spend all day looking at, you know, this department, that department, but I think it's important that if there's an official, whether it be a policy or whether it be a resolution to say, hey, you know, the Village of Austin will do its best due diligence to ensure that there's, you know, things are interpreted to their best ability. Because at least, you know, if you do have that, you know, when things come up or when people say, hey, this is not, you know, I had a hard problem, you know, someone can bring something to your office and then you can work it out.
Any of the above, because
I didn't know if
you're
he was done.
suggesting a next step, and we haven't even heard from Rita's reaction to the proposal.
Were you
Are you
done?
done?
No, I was raising the question.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I'm in agreement with what everybody's been saying. It's just that I think we have a lot of stuff. We have people who speak languages. A person may leave who speaks Spanish, and a person might come in who speaks Portuguese. I don't know. I mean, it's human resource. There are different touch points in the village. It seems to me that you could put a plan in place that every department by, I don't know, first quarter or whatever, or the end of the year, you know, sort of looks at its human resource allocation of people who are bilingual and are willing to speak bilingually to people. The fact that you're born speaking a language doesn't mean that you actually, as a part of your job, want to do that, okay? So I think you take an inventory. The pamphlets that are used, I'm anti-print. I think it's 1990s diversity. It's outdated. I think you look at technology, you either use, give people pads and iPhones and you use Babbel. You could Google, which I did when I got your email, when you just put in the top 10 of any of that. Translators, transcribers, lots of them come up. Some of them are free, some of them aren't. I don't believe in hiring a vendor for this. We'll get another nice vendor assignment of how to do that. I think you take an inventory of every department. I think that's the beginning of a plan, is to say, what do you have? And where you touch people a lot, where people come a lot. So, you know, where they're coming in, I think you make sure people speak a language. And Spanish seems reasonable to me, but it actually, all these systems and technologies work in all languages, in multiple languages. So the website does have Google, but it can be upgraded to have other things, and some of the forms can be done a little bit differently. Right, so that it's any language, so you're not limited by one language. But the court has a bilingual person, for example, but because every single case is actually, you know, if it's 125 tickets on a Thursday or whatever they do, they're going to be a little different. So if she's not there, the person who actually got certified in the county, so you might do an inventory by department, village manager, and say, okay, this department has no one. We got to get somebody certified, or we have to, the next hire. I mean, that's a plan, because I read your email, and part of what the state does actually say you have to have a plan, It didn't actually say that you have to do what the plan says you're doing. It actually says you have to have a plan of what you're going to do, and some of them did do it and some of them didn't. Their plan was, we'll do it. It wasn't, and this is how much money we need to do it. So a plan doesn't actually mean an action. The action is actually doing the plan. So I sort of was interested in what the state did, but then when I clicked through to some of them, not so impressive. I don't know of any village or town that has as much as we do already. I think some of the cities do. And again, for the public, Peaks is actually, I believe, a city.
It's smaller than us, but
And
it's
so
the
it
same.
follows, regardless of the size, Poughkeepsie's actually not much bigger than us, and they're doing some really interesting things. So Karen, I think like learning, like inventorying what we have, figuring out how technology works, right? So there are telephone systems. So if somebody comes to DP, walks into finance in Tom's area, walks in for taxes or something, right? The goal is that they understand what is happening, that they have an issue, but they can use a phone system to call whatever language they need. We could be bigger than just one language. And I think you're suggesting, I'm agreeing with you. You're suggesting that. I'm suggesting start with an inventory, figure what we have. By the way, I think we're going to discover we have a lot of stuff. I am not a proponent of reprinting brochures and paper. It's really expensive and usually not great. And it usually becomes obsolete literally when it comes off the press. And you know this, you do marketing and events and you know that's what happens. But I do think a better use of technology. And there are some really cheap pieces of technology that we could use. And the subcommittees are also sort of quasi-departments. So we can put a plan that says, I don't know how you codify this stuff. So I sort of heard the word. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how we would do that. And I don't know how to choose what's vital. I do think that you start with the pyramid upside down, which says, what's a technology that anybody can walk into any human contact? Is it Babel? Is it, and I forgot, there were a couple that I actually had with me when I thought we were going to discuss it, and then we didn't, because I had my list of the top 10, because that's all I did is Google and then went on their websites. I don't know the laws of municipality that you can't use one thing versus another because it's just communication. It's like you're answering a question. How big does my deck have to be? At DB, oh, well, it has to be minimum of this. I don't think that's a municipal like law. That's a communication. Put somebody on the phone in any language you want. Boom, they explain it. They talk. I mean, I've seen it used. You've seen it used. This is not. So I think we could put a plan, and I think we could put metrics to it. The codifying of that, I don't even.
So, just for clarification,
Maybe Quantel has.
you said that the forms would have to be uploaded to the website?
At this time, the forms, they're just PDFs. And they come from a Word document. Some of them are 20 years old, photocopies of photocopies. So they would, it's really more of a, if we're going to take all the forms online, we have to think about getting them.
So just before we get too far along, Corporation Council has done some research on what governments have done on this, and maybe you want to just sort of top line.
Can I just, because I don't want to forget, just respond to just 11.
Oh, sure.
Just,
Sure. I'm sorry.
I'd be more than happy to. That'd be great.
I haven't spoken either.
Oh, and
I'm
Mary
sorry.
Garrity.
That's okay, but if there's more information here, I want to hear it.
No, that's great.
Yeah,
Actually.
yeah.
So the state executive order has mandatory orders in it. The programming stuff is more like we pledge to continually work on this and be so. Our codifying would be, which is solely the policy at the policy level for this board, regardless of what department's narrative or bias or whatever you want to call it is identifying what I thought was pretty easy parameters. So going forward as a first step, our press releases, our emergency notices, the mayor's message that everyone, likes to get, those are considered vital because it's important information being released on a as needed basis or emergency basis. Just identifying simple stuff like that from the board. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this is because regardless of the rhetoric around whether the U.S. has a official language or not, and all the controversy going around.
We don't.
Okay,
No,
just
no.
none of us ever said that.
No. That's
Not one of us
no,
has
no,
ever
no, no.
said that.
No one here has, but that's been the national resistance when it comes to the conversation of it. I feel that, Austin, because of who we are, we can be the leaders and show that, you know what? Yes, we aren't the city of New York, and we don't have the capacity to do a full, comprehensive, multi-$1,000 thing. But look, we're a model for a small one that had a big, diverse population, and I have seen that it's been a huge barrier to people. And whether it's through involvement, whether it's through even knowing how to sign up for an email, whether it's they understand how to speak it, but they don't understand how to read it, whether they, all that goes with that. So the codifying would be us accepting that we have some challenges and basically saying that we want to go out of our way, that whether you speak whatever you speak and whether you're fluent, whether that is through writing or reading or speaking, that we want to make sure that you understand what is going on, how we operate, and if you really wanted to push it could really go into people with disabilities, unseen, seen, which we spoke about. So, but that obviously can be, this is just this would codify for the first time in Ossining that we acknowledge that languages as a whole matter here and impact our understanding, how we move forward, starting the comprehensive plan, any major initiative. The school district, you've even seen, have used creative ways and do training for interpreters and have volunteers, and some stuff they hire, some stuff they don't. But they own the problem, and it is a problem. We have started, but we're not where we should be for a population of our size and a population with our proficiency when it comes to top 4 languages spoken, written, or read. And now's really the time to kind of say, you know what, we've tried, it's been a little scattered, but we want to be a little bit more concise and more intentional about how we reach out to people. And our first 3 steps are X, Y, Z. So I kept it so simple as 2 pages, simply because I don't think that I should propose the whole thing myself, because it's such a complicated and complex living document that I think will be updated and expanded for years to come, depending on technology, depending on services, and we do more outreach now than Ossining done 10 years ago. We just do. So yeah, that's my only thing.
I'm mindful of the time, and we've had a lot on our plate, and I am going to ask us to do executive session for matters related to collective bargaining, and I'm mentioning that now for a particular reason. But before I know Karen's she was chopping at the bit, and now she's kind of resigned herself to being to listening to all of us give all of our thoughts on this. And I'm really glad to hear that Stuart's done some research. But before you all weigh in, I just want to reflect back what I'm hearing and what seems like might be a logical next step. And I'm always mindful of language. When we use the term codify, to me that means changing the code. And I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I think what we're talking about is, at least initially, a statement of intent, which I'm hearing a lot of unanimity on what the intent would be to be much more effective at appropriately, or to communicate with people in the language where they can really understand all of the information. Exactly what that means is, I don't think that we are capable in the next 10 or 15 minutes to identify what would be the vital documents, largely because we don't have a comprehensive list, and we really need to talk to staff members about what's feasible. But I do think that I'm hearing very much a unified intention of wanting to do a better job, and whether that is our making use of technology for online communications, whether that is on our forms that people have to fill out, whether that's things that are documents that people have, whether that's on-demand translation services. And I don't think that we that's a process to do all of that amount of research and to identify what is the plan going forward, and to do it with, in a deliberate manner, has to start with a statement of purpose, big picture statement from the Board of Trustees. And that to me seems like the first logical step. This is something you have talked about since last year, and I'm very glad that you are having a chance to bring it to us. I don't know that, I don't know how far through the planning process we're going to be able to get at this point with, a month and a half left in the year. But with that, I look at our very patient staff and say, what would you recommend to be a logical next step, or what do you want us to have in mind as we plan for how we can fulfill this shared intention of having a language access policy?
So I think the idea of understanding, because a lot of this happens organically, and we certainly have a significant number of staff members who are fluent in other languages and do utilize this language, predominantly Spanish, to when dealing with our constituents and the public in general. I think that we can get a better understanding of each department, the capacity within each department, and also a better understanding of what they're seeing and making sure that we're not setting up any barriers. After that, I think it becomes somewhat, I do think you have sort of an ability to prioritize some things over others. I think some things lend themselves to translation more easily. I think your departments with the most amount of resident touch are also, are obviously important. But there were some issues that we looked at that Stuart looked into regarding specific policies, and also I think that we're very instructive into how we can best do this, but how we can also make sure that depending on the function or the nature of the translation, that we're doing it in a way that is also making sure that we're conveying accuracy, and some things are more precise than others when you're talking about this. So I don't know if you want to just highlight, Stuart, some of the things that you found, just to provide sort of like an overview of some of the things we need to look at.
Folks, just so you know, a little show and tell. This pile, these are the language access plans for every department in the state of New York, of New York State government, all effective as of May 30th of this year. So that's when they all went into effect. And the state, what they do is they go by the top 6 languages, basically, as you know. And it's interesting that the only department in the state where a limited English proficient person cannot fill out the form in their native language is for the DMV. Well, it actually does make sense because you have to be able to read the traffic signs and you have to be able to do all that. For all other departments, you actually can fill out forms in your native language, but the state then, each department has procedures for how those forms are then translated, how quickly they're translated. To go to one point that Trustee Levin made, what each department does do, specifically those departments that have dealings with the public, because not every state agency actually has dealings directly with the public, is they have a list of those employees who, one, are civil service certified in the language, which means in Westchester County you would be able to pass a level 3 proficiency in the language, as well as those individuals who consider themselves self-sufficient in the language. It's important to note that those individuals cannot be forced to translate. Okay, it's not their job. And one of the things that's very important is that if someone comes in and wants translation services, and they want to use a family member to translate, they're supposed to sign a waiver that they are not using your service. But it's very important that if you're using them for a legal discussion or a specific function of the village, they have to use your translation services. They can't use their own. One of the things that's very important the state has emphasized is that when you translate forms, they have to be culturally sensitive to the person you're translating it for. We may look at a form in English and it may say certain things, but when it gets translated into Spanish or Portuguese or whatever, there may be things in that form that the person may think completely may either make no sense or culturally insensitive. It's a very big deal with the state in terms of their forms. Particularly if you notice, Department of Labor, Workers' Compensation, they have translated hundreds of their forms. Others do far less. But what they determine to be vital documents varies department to department. Tompkins County has effectively a very short plan. One thing, to go back to the state, what the state does, for example, is they have a smaller version of what they call their language identification tool. In other words, a person comes in and they do not speak any language that you know. This essentially has, I think, 15 different languages on it, and they will point to the language. And you can then get them on the phone with someone to translate. For those particular state agencies where you work a lot in the field, let's use an analogy, our code enforcement officers, they would have the ability, through the state agencies, for example, to on their phone be able to essentially do a translation service right then and there with the individual. That's, I know, down the road, but the point is there are different ways to do it. But each agency is different, and each agency, what they do is, in terms of their documents, semi-annually, each department looks at their documents, which documents need to be translated, which documents should be changed, and how they're supposed to be. But it's important in each one is to know who speaks what language within your department, who is basically able to do that and is willing to do that, which is really the second part to that. And then it's a matter of just, going through. And again, the state is very clear in delineating between translation and interpretation. Translation, obviously, is the written word. And so who is basically going to do that translation? The state has a contract with various agencies that do this stuff. And it gets sent out. For some of the larger state agencies, such as Department of Health, for example, they do a lot of their translating in-house because they have so many people with so many different languages. But even there are languages they come up with. There's a dialect in Chinese called Chow Chow, which I had not heard of. And so if someone were to come with that, you could call up on the phone, you could get it done, you could do it that way. So there's different ways to do it, and I appreciate Trustee Herrera bringing it out. But the vital documents are important because you really do want to know. Because interestingly enough, the state actually doesn't define vital documents. Each department has their own definition of what they consider to be a vital document. And it would be a question for the different departments here as to what they consider to be vital and not to be vital. And when you come into the office, who's the person who will be able to do the translation for you? It's also important if you're having a discussion, and let's use Section 8, for example, where it is something which is essentially confidential. You have to provide them with a place for translation where no one else is going to be there.
Well, just piggyback, that's a federal, so the federal language access, that's actual,
right.
That's already protected, so that should already be provided in her. That's a federal function and operation, right. So I forgot what the actual bill or law or order is, but
it's an executive order.
Yeah, that is actually already covered and protected and should already be an operation that office uses.
It could well be. I just,
You're not saying it isn't.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm pointing out, but each one, the state, as I said, has it different ways, but, one of the things that's important, the person at the reception desk is in many ways the most important person, because in many ways they're the ones who are going to determine, or at least help to determine, if the person seeking help actually needs language assistance and what language do they need the assistance in. and then they can refer it out to other people in the office if there are people who speak that language and are able to do that. So, getting those people as sort of your front line becomes critical, and then, and then going from there. But that's just an overview.
I really appreciate that, Stuart. And the state, as I said, is probably the best model. Their guidance, as I said, is solely for state agencies and departments. But as Corp Counsel mentioned, and I'll say, it's a good model to just see how it can comprehensively be done. But again, because it's so uncommon for smaller municipalities to even have this discussion comprehensively, instead of doing it so piecemeal and not really having a standard policy or understanding as to the purpose or intention as to why you're doing what you're doing. This as policymakers is really up to us to once, if we're going to the route to get an analysis and recommendations from department heads as to what they consider vital, then that comes to the board, right? And then we, analyze and discuss whether we agree with their definition of vital documents or not. And for many other reasons, the board may have a couple of vital documents and or operations that we feel are vital. So I think it's purposely vague and undefined for a legislative body to determine. So yeah, thank you, Stuart, and thank you.
So I'm definitely hearing that there's a lot of support for having to figuring this out. And I'm glad to know that, thank you, Stuart, for doing all the research that you and hopefully your department has done to help us understand how it's in place in other, at the state level anyway. I don't want to do anything rash or that's ill-informed or short-sighted, but I don't know if there's a formal action for us to take in the coming weeks or not, or if this is just the beginning of a conversation that we all agree should happen.
I would propose that at least the 3 paragraphs that go into even why we're having this discussion in the first place, that defines who we are as a community. A, defines what LEP individuals are. C, what the barriers are and how we could fix them. And then, as we do for many programs in our budget and, before our year starts, lay out an intention or an action plan as to how we plan to address and meet those goals and or challenges, right? So that would be in 90 days, the following departments or each department will submit a one-pager identifying what they feel are vital documents to all residents, regardless of race, age, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The board will then, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to highlight the whole thing. But
I agree that that's a really logical to create the milestones and the anticipated timeline makes a lot of sense. But to create it in a thoughtful, well-informed way, it's not something we can do, in a week or two. Because it requires a lot of conversations with a lot of department heads. And our manager probably wants to comment on that also.
Well, I think that we can certainly, start with, a better understanding of what we have right now, just in terms of, maybe it's constructing a survey or just getting departments to understand what their, sort of needs assessment, if you will, by department has been and how they're responding to it in terms of foreign language. Some departments are doing a tremendous amount. The clerk's office would be one. Most of the departments that are public facing have native Spanish speakers who facilitate translation and help customers when they come in, or residents when they come in, not really customers. So I think just better understanding that. And then in terms of, I think understanding what the vital documents are in each department, those are things we can put together. I think really understanding what it's going to take us to translate that and understanding the budget that's required is going to just take once we have a better sense of what that work is. And I think I'd also like to, it's good to know what the state's doing. It's also good to know what other municipalities are doing and how they're dealing with things. I'd even like to sort of talk to organizations like Open Door that deal almost in a bilingual way with across everything with a lot of sensitive information, confidential information, information that needs to be communicated precisely. So I'd love to have a conversation with them as well to sort of better understand how we can adapt this. And I have to be honest, I just cannot possibly articulate a timeline that I'm comfortable with right now without giving it a little bit more. But,
Thank you.
Bless you. But I think it's something that is important. I think to an extent, again, a lot of this is happening organically, and the more we can do to perpetuate it and make sure it's done in an intentional, thoughtful way, there's no issue with supporting that or wanting that to happen. But so if we want to even just draft an intent and put them writing, but to put a really fine point on what the exact deliverables are and the timing and everything, I just can't. I don't know what it would be right this minute. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on this. I think if we set an expectation, we really have to make sure we're doing it in the time that we say we're doing it, and we're not talking about doing it again next year because we didn't have time to do it or whatever.
I appreciate that because it is going to be a comprehensive thing, and because it's not a dig to us, but because it's not done in an effective or appropriate manner comprehensively, it is going to take time to fully do it correctly. Because right now we don't do it correctly. We just interpret stuff that we feel is best, and our intentions are great, but it's just not as one.
It's an intense process, and
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to just say, oh yeah, we'll do this and it'll be great. I want to make sure that the things that we're not thinking of that may make it more complicated, because it always seems to be something that we're just thinking that through. But again, the intent to get this done and be as fluid as we can on being able to communicate with people with different languages is an objective that I wholeheartedly support.
So with that said, what I would like to see, which we've done in the past for other initiatives and programs, is without an actual plan, even though we have a plan, but is some sort of an intention that has two budget estimates or numbers or budget holds. So for example, last year we did that for workforce development. Last year we did that for what else did we do? A budget hold that we didn't actually.
Yeah, well, the workforce development is a good example, because what we did is we said that there was a portion of the contingency plan that would be identified for this, and then it's a flexible amount. It's not its own line item because it's not actually a defined program yet, but it's acknowledged in the budget so that when we're able to follow through with
I just want the public to really believe that yes, we believe in it, but yes, we should have an intention to.
It's formally included in the budget, even though it's a little bit of a.
That's why I don't want to overpromise it. I want to make sure we
Okay, great. All right, thanks.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Warren.
Yes.
We got 1, 2, 3 here. Boom, boom, boom. What can we do? Second of 3 nights in a row with you.
And they're going to be that quick.
Oh, thank you. Let's not overpromise and underdeliver here. Go ahead.
These are 3 short administrative items that will result in village board action at the legislative meetings. So I just wanted to give a run through on those right now. The first one has to do with unpaid water and sewer bills. Last Friday, we sent out final demand letters, I'll call them, to water customers that have unpaid water bills owing through billed water charges through June 2019, warning them if they did not pay the water bill that we were going to petition the village board to add it to their 2020 property tax roll, tax bill, as authorized by New York State law. So that's the process. This will actually be a village board resolution on the December 18th board meeting. We're giving the homeowners until, or the property owners or water customers until December 4th to pay these charges, and then we'll start preparing the certified list for submission to the village board. The second item is two tax surcharge claims that we received in the last week. They're actually very small dollar amounts. As you know, the village is not a assessing agency. We rely on the town of Austining to provide the assessments and determine the assessments for the properties. And when people challenge their assessments, they're defended by the town, and they're also sometimes negotiated, and they're approved by the New York State Supreme Court. Is that right? Or is
Yes,
that
in
county
White Plains,
court?
correct.
Yes. So the first one is property owned by 26 Yale Associates, which I thought was going to be on Yale Avenue. It's actually the property right next door to this building at 2224 Croton Avenue. They have a 3-year tax certiorari settlement totaling just over $2,517. And the second one is at 105 Croton Avenue, which is that new business across the street from Seatown on the corner of Croton Avenue and Linden. And that's a 1-year tax certiorari settlement for the 2019 tax roll in the amount of $1,372.42. So these will be a resolution at next week's legislative meeting. And the third item is actually a follow-up to last night's budget work session when Paul was talking about street paving and sidewalks and curb work. Usually every spring when we establish the New Year's capital project for that type of work, we usually close out the prior year's capital project and roll over any remaining balance into the New Year's project. We didn't do this this past spring because I think it might have been due to weather. The work was cut short in the fall of, the work was cut short in the fall of 2018, and we had some open purchase orders for the work that was eventually done in the spring of 2019. So we left the 2018 capital project open so that Paul could finish that work, and then we established the 2019 project. Now we're ready to close the 2018 project, and there's $77,049 that we'd like to carry over to the 2019 project. And also we were able to submit for additional CHIP state aid above and beyond the amount that was estimated in the 2019 capital project. And the goal of this was to put together additional money because Paul wanted to do some additional work this year. Between the 2 years of capital projects, the work's going to aggregate about $1.1 million. So the capital project budget modification will be to close the 2018 project, roll over the $77,000 balance to the 2019 project, and add the additional CHIP state aid of $160,563 and modify the 2019 CHIPS, the 2019 street and sidewalk and curb work project to $717,613. And that'll be a resolution next week as well, please.
Terrific. Now, there was a time when the village did not include a lot of roadwork money in their budgets, and we're at a very different mindset now, and there might have been budgetary reasons why there was not a lot of money put toward that for years, but we're doing our best to make up for lost time, and we say yes to absolutely every dollar that we think DPW can put into road work. So I love hearing that there's $1 million that was spent in this last chunk of time, and may there be millions more, because there's always more road work to do. So the memo that you have with this is linked with today's agenda item, but all of those numbers that you just gave us in the correlating funds will be included in the agenda, and it'll be linked there for anybody who wants to see that before we vote on it next week. All right.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Tom.
much.
Thank you, Tom.
See you
Thank you.
tomorrow. Yes, it's all budget meetings all week. All right. Is there anything else that is not on this agenda other than a motion?
Question: is it possible for us to go into a work session on Tuesday?
How
we
do we?
wanted to?
Can we do something in continuing business or?
On Tuesday?
You mean?
Or-
You mean tomorrow?
No, well, or tomorrow. Is that possible? Like,
For what?
so I actually, because I didn't know there was a resolution for the youth bureau, I would like to discuss it because it seems fairly simple.
Is there a resolution for a youth bureau?
Well, they can. I looked at Portchester's.
I don't think we have a resolution for these bureau next week.
That's why I said
Oh,
I
okay.
once won. That's why I said Tuesday. Or either can we go into work?
How specific does the resolution need to be? Because if it needs to,
So what it says is,
Yeah.
so what it basically says is it establishes the executive director. It talks about, the function, which is very, very much in line with the civil service requirements of an executive director. It talks about the youth council and the youth board, which was pretty much outlined in the presentation.
I'm unfamiliar with it, so I
Okay.
can only say this. Bill did say he also used the word codified.
Mhm.
Are we talking about a local law that we're putting into our code to create it, or are we?
So it is in the code in Portchester.
Because then it would require, then you have to go
Public
through the
meetings and
process.
all of
So,
that.
that on a 5-page presentation that Bill just put together.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
So next week, if can you do any research that you have that you can give us an update next week during continuing business, and then we'll see because we do still have 3 more legislative sessions this year where we might be able to pass a resolution if we're able to pull it
Okay.
together. So
I can have that for you. For
okay,
next week.
even if it's just an update for us to understand what we would need to have, or if there could be a general statement of intent that doesn't get into more
So-
specifics.
Can I'm going to say this again, okay? We have a lot of things that we want staff to do. I wait for stuff. All of a sudden, we now have our attorney working on one more thing out of a list that just was created tonight when other things don't get done. This is not okay. We're assigning him to look at language stuff that I wasn't aware of that I see he worked on. Now he's going to do some other research. Manny's been waiting for stuff to get done. And now we're assigning the attorney to have another week to all of a sudden get stuff done. We're supposed to have lists of priorities that the lawyer should be working on. And all of a sudden, this stuff sort of gets rammed through in a matter of, 2 minutes? How about the stuff that we are waiting for now for months that we would like done? Is that going to get to anything? Or do we just show up at a meeting and all of a sudden we need research on something that came up 2 weeks ago? I don't have a problem that research was done, but now I'm sitting here with one more thing being assigned to the attorney based on, can we get research done so we can vote on something within a week or two? You have things you're waiting to get done? Okay, I have things waiting to get done. We're on a microphone. I'm not going to list my list right now. It's not right. It's not fair. Like, how do we prioritize stuff? I'm not okay with this. I'm not supporting this. If you can get 3 votes, that's great. I'm not supporting this. We just asked the attorney to now spend hours on something without a conversation about what about the other stuff that we're waiting for. We put it in the budget. It's in the budget, is it not? We're going to vote on the budget. It says what the budget is set up for. Okay, can we get stuff done that we're waiting for? When it's not even necessary, frankly, to do this.
So that is a good
It's in
point.
the
That
budget.
we may want to approve the budget and then do the resolution, because the budget, not that I'm anticipating any issue with this because it's something everyone agrees on, but in terms of a matter of how we do it. It won't, doing the resolution for this now or later doesn't stop the process or delay the process.
So I just want to clarify. It was just a conversation about it because I understand that the budget has to be passed, and I'm also aware about the remainder legislative agendas that we have remaining in this year. So ideally, it would be great is if the budget is approved, right?
Right.
That same day, you could pass a resolution for something that you just passed in the budget.
Right.
Again,
You don't have to, and there's no research.
but it was a request, Rika. I mean,
Okay, you know what? You're right.
right.
It's a
It-
request.
it's a
What I don't
request.
appreciate is all of a sudden the lawyer. I mean, it actually wasn't a conversation with you. It's not right. You're assigning him one more thing. I got to tell you, we'll go into session. I have an issue with how we prioritize our staff's work. That some of us do not get attention to the matters that we have at hand, and stuff gets shoved through that pushes things back. Okay, it's not right, and we'll have this off into a different session and not do it right now.
I mean, you kind of started it.
But I'm going to end it because it's not appropriate
Yeah.
for me to continue it
Okay,
now. It's not appropriate to have this conversation. It's more of an executive session discussion.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable being put in this position, but the youth bureau is something that's been discussed for months by the village, and it is in the budget for that reason. Whether or not there's a resolution that needs to be passed, that's news from today. I don't know exactly how complicated that is. We'll continue a conversation, and you can help us assess how much research would need to be done to even make a decision on if we need to move forward with that now, or if it's something that just is a matter of course once the process is underway. All right. Can we have a resolution to go into executive session for matters related to collective bargaining?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Please join us next week at the courthouse for our next legislative session. This meeting is adjourned.